Whether you're an avid football fan or really just trying to kick your friend's ass in fantasy football, you're gonna want to know what guys are overlooked or guys that are underrated or slept on. Well, here's 10 guys that are huge sleepers ahead of the 2022 NFL season. Quarterbacks get a lot of attention.
Drew Lock has a horse cock!
So it's really hard to go under the radar, but I think Jalen Hurts really has. There's a lot of excitement for his old college teammate Tua Tagovailoa because he got a new wideout, Tyreek Hill. Well, Hurts just got himself a shiny new wideout as well, AJ Brown. And honestly, he could have a good year. Hurts had to sit behind Carson Wentz in his rookie season after the Eagles selected him in the second round in 2020. But he got to start the rest of the season starting in week 13. He went 1-3, passed for over 1,000 yards to go with 6 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. Plus, he showed what kind of threat he could be in the rushing game, adding 354 yards and 3 touchdowns. Maybe it wasn't as much playtime as Philadelphia would have hoped, but that's just how it goes. But come 2021, it was Hurts' team, and it actually went pretty well. The Eagles improved a lot. Philly went 8-7, and it came on the back of Hurts, who passed for over 3,100 yards, 16 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, rushed for almost 800 yards, and had 10 rushing scores. He was a Pro Bowl alternate, but more importantly, the Eagles made the playoffs, but to nobody's surprise, lost immediately. Nothing to really actually say for Travis Etienne in the pros, and maybe that's a good thing with how much of a disaster the Jaguars were last season. He suffered a foot injury in the preseason that needed surgery and caused him to miss the entire year. But Urban Meyer took him in the first round for a reason. Probably. Well, maybe not. But still, Trevor Lawrence and Etienne were studs together at Clemson and already have plenty of familiarity. Twice, Etienne was the ACC Player of the Year and, of course, won a natty. There's already a relationship there and they've dominated before. At the very least, Etienne will get a ton of usage just as a security blanket for Lawrence. The big move this offseason was the Broncos going out and trading for Russell Wilson. Courtland Sutton is the clear number 1 in Denver, and Jerry Jeudy is a bit of a wild card, especially after being hurt some of 2021. But the one guy under the radar in Denver is Tim Patrick. He isn't exactly a sexy name. I mean, come on, the dude's name is Tim, but he's pretty damn good at football. But nobody really saw that coming when he went undrafted in 2017. Patrick had 2 quick stints with the Ravens and 49ers, but the Broncos signed him to their practice squad, and then he played in every game in 2018. In 2020, he finally broke out with over 700 yards and 6 touchdowns, and again, last year, he had over 700 yards. Plus, Denver just gave him a 3-year, $34.5 million deal, and I honestly have a hard time believing the Broncos would give a guy over $11 million per season to not use him a ton. The Bengals are far from a sleeper team. That's just what happens when you go on a Super Bowl run out of nowhere. But all the attention seems to go to Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, overlooking whom I would consider one of the most underrated players in the league, T. Higgins. Higgins was taken by the Bengals in the second round in 2020, 1 year removed from winning a national championship alongside Trevor Lawrence. As a rookie, Higgins was a reliable wideout. He had over 900 yards and 6 touchdowns, and then saw improvements last season, going for nearly 1,100 yards and 6 touchdowns. It's not exactly a secret that the Falcons are just going to suck next year. Atlanta is in full rebuild mode post Matt Ryan, and it may be a while until they're, well, competent again, but even if they are ass, they're still going to be playing every Sunday and probably going to be throwing the ball a lot because they're always going to be losing. The Falcons drafted Drake London in the first round of the 2022 NFL Draft, and he has a lot of hype around him, and for good reason. But there's another wideout on the Atlanta roster that may make some noise. Bryan Edwards. The Falcons actually traded a 5th round pick to the Raiders for him, after in 2021, Edwards had over 500 yards and 3 touchdowns. He definitely showed some promise, and it'll be interesting to see what he can become in Atlanta. He wasn't particularly good as a rookie, less than 200 yards, but Edwards was a star at South Carolina and holds the school franchise record for receptions and receiving yards in a career. So definitely don't get it twisted, the talent is there. If there's another guy that's going to see a ton of usage, mainly because the rest of his position room is ass, it's Rashod Bateman. The Ravens drafted him in 2021, and this offseason, Baltimore traded away Hollywood Brown. So now, Bateman steps in as the number 1 for Lamar Jackson. Bateman was pretty good at Minnesota. He had over 700 yards and 6 touchdowns just as a true freshman. Then he really broke out in 2019, and he was a first-team All-Big Ten after recording over 1,200 yards and 11 touchdowns. Obviously, like everybody else, his 2020 year was just weird. He only played in 5 games with the whole COVID mess, but he did average almost 100 yards per game. Bateman has gone really under the radar, probably because he didn't play much. He was on injured reserve after a groin injury, but in 12 games, he did have 512 yards, and now he's in line for a lot more offensive targets. You won't find many guys in the NFL right now that are more overlooked than Amon-Ra St. Brown, and it makes sense why he's so underrated. For one, he plays for the Lions, who, nicely put, nobody really gives a shit about. Amon-Ra is only getting into his second season in the pros, and he was only a 4th-round pick in 2021. To be fair, he was a bit overshadowed by Drake London in his final year at USC, but once he got to Detroit, he was by far the most reliable wideout on the roster. Nobody else on the Lions even had over 600 yards, and he had over 900, and also added 5 touchdowns too. The Lions are still going to suck, and Jared Goff is going to have to rely on Amon-Ra. It can be pretty hard to evaluate which rookies are going to be sleepers, but if there is a big one that stands out, it's Christian Watson. The Packers wide receiver room isn't exactly good. Sammy Watkins is new and hasn't really shown that he can stay healthy, and well, the elephant in the room, the Packers traded away Devontae Adams. Those targets have to go somewhere, right? Green Bay drafted Watson in the 2nd round for a reason. He helped NDSU alongside Trey Lance and even won 4 FCS national championships. Like everybody else, that 2020 season was cut really short, but he did have over 2,100 yards and 14 touchdowns in 5 years for the Bison. So we'll see just how big of a playmaker he can be for the Packers. Do you remember how good Austin Hooper was with the Falcons? He was one of the best tight ends in the NFL and even made the Pro Bowl twice. Hooper had over 500 yards in 3 straight seasons and nearly 800 yards in 2019. He got a big 4-year, $44 million deal with the Browns, but had less than 800 yards in his 2 years before Cleveland finally released him. He just didn't get as much usage as he would have hoped, a lot in part to David Njoku's presence. Well, Hooper signed with the Titans this offseason, a team looking for offensive answers after trading away A.J. Brown. And while the Titans tight ends have sucked recently, now Ryan Tannehill can have a reliable big target in Hooper. On the defensive side of the ball, the Raiders have found a gem that's gone really under the radar, Nate Hobbs. Las Vegas took him in the 5th round in 2021 and ended up being the best cornerback last season in almost every metric. Casey Hayward has helped him come along as a mentor, and Hobbs had over 70 tackles, a sack, and an interception in 2021. He's going to have to learn a bit of a new scheme under his brand new defensive coordinator, Patrick Graham, but the talent is certainly there. Now is a great time for him to prove he can be a reliable corner in the pros, and hopefully be respected instead of being slept on.